This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Omar Shihab. Omar is the founder and visionary behind BOCA, the Middle East's leading sustainable restaurant, and a renowned hospitality project director and restaurateur. In today's conversation, we'll explore the intersectionality of sustainability, culinary innovation, and local food production in the UAE. You'll hear Omar explain how he's championing sustainability in the UAE's food and beverage industry. He'll share his experience in overcoming challenges while running an environmentally conscious restaurant. And most excitingly, Omar will introduce us to halophytes, a promising and innovative ingredient family that could revolutionize sustainable gastronomy in the region. Let's get into it. Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here. Good to have you.
It's so great to be with you here in Dubai at BOCA. And for those who don't know what BOCA is, can you share a little bit about BOCA?
BOCA is the modern Spanish restaurant. We are set in the financial district of Dubai. This is where a lot of the international and local banks and financial institutions, insurance companies are set up. It is a very important place when it comes to dining. So we've got a mix of very high-end restaurants around us. We were created back in 2014. We're a homegrown brand, which is something fairly new in our city. Dubai is a place I think a lot of people associated with glitz and glamour and high-end and luxury, which is obviously still the case, and it's something that helped put Dubai on the culinary map, perhaps. But we believed 10 years ago, and a lot of others as well, that we have enough creative people living and working in the city that we can come up with our own dining experience that could rival any import. So those were the initial ideas and thoughts behind the creation of BOCA.
Can you tell us a little bit about the role that you play here? Because you've got a quite unique role. You're not a chef. You've become synonymous with this amazing restaurant and also the work that it does. So tell us a little bit about your role.
Initially, when the investing family decided that they want to have a food and beverage outlet, I did a bit of research on what type of cuisine was missing. And I think that's where modern Spanish comes into play. But it was a lot of the direction that I thought in terms of not just cuisine, but the type of service, the type of experience, and the idea of creating a restaurant with a real sense of space that it's built in. A lot of dining experiences are built around the idea of transforming people somewhere else. And in Dubai, that's something that is quite highlighted in experiences, rightfully so. A lot of people go out to dine so that they can forget about their daily worries. But it doesn't mean that we can't create something with that sense of place, meaning how do we differentiate between a restaurant that is based out of Dubai or London or New York or any city in the world? I think that was really what I had in mind. I was born, brought up here in Dubai, in the UAE. This is where I call home. I am originally from Jordan. That's where my parents are from. But I was born and raised here. I lived all of my life. And I have a very strong connection to what comes out of the sea. Going to the fish market was something that we did every single Friday, going out to the desert and foraging for a few plants that come out after the rain is something that I can associate with the memory of my father. So, I wanted to really have some element of connection to Dubai, to the UAE. So with Chef, we created a small little, I don't know if you could call it a program, but an idea to source fish from the Gulf and present them in our menu with the techniques that were presented, Spanish, Mediterranean. But it didn't mean that we can't source locally. We get certain proteins from here. We also wanted to do it with a bit of purpose. So we went straight to the fishing calendar of the UAE, an official government document, very simple. It's accessible for everyone on the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment's website, and it lists every species that lives in the waters of the UAE and what are the better months to consume it. So that's what we did. And what we ended up with are species that are not so common. You don't see them a lot in commercial kitchens. And the transformation that happened in the kitchen and everything that chef built around it really became a little bit of our identity. And that's really where I started seeing my role and my place in the restaurant, obviously from a director's perspective to sort of say, this is the kind of experience that we want, this is the type of food and beverage, but also spending a lot of my time recently, especially in the last 4 years, just doing a lot of research on ingredients, but a lot of research in general on how to build and operate a responsible and conscious and sustainable food and beverage outlet.
Tell me a little bit more as you've focused on sustainability, which you talked about research. You're almost a researcher and a learner in that sense. But as you've moved into this sustainability space, what has been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome?
I think the constant challenge and something that will always be there is to continuously balance between what a responsible operation looks like, which is obviously new territory. It's constantly balancing that. So trying to understand what it would mean, because we always have to balance the business side of it. Because if we don't have sustainable businesses, then we wouldn't have the platform that we have today to talk about and execute the things that we want to do, whether it's responsible sourcing or waste management or contributing to the community or our overall impact. So it's that constant balance between what makes sense for the business and what makes sense in terms of, leaving that positive impact has always been, and I think that will always be the challenge for us in our markets, at least.
Being in the restaurant, it's always good to hear the restaurant noises around us. We were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, of course.
And restaurants are about people, and they're not just experiments happening without people. They have customers, they have people that come. You need to make sure that there's a business model behind that. As you've learned through that process, where has there been some moments where that's been really hard for you to kind of navigate the choices that you're making?
No, you're absolutely right, Paul. I think, the people side is absolutely instrumental in making sure that, whatever we think about and we want to do is reflected in our operation. So you've got two parts. Obviously, our people, the people that deliver our food, our service, our experience, and then obviously the guests that are consuming, that are entering the restaurant. From our perspective, I think that is also a challenge that will always be there. How to translate everything that we're trying to do and understand so that our teams understand that and they're able to translate it in the way that they operate, they work, they transform ingredients, they handle waste. Because even if I had the best ideas in terms of how to run a sustainable business, I would not be able to execute correctly or deliver, because it's my team who's doing it. It's my team who are handling the ingredients when they arrive into the restaurant. They're the ones who are unpacking it. They're the ones who are in touch with the supplier to understand the provenance of the ingredients, to understand what kind of packaging do they arrive in. And then the chefs are the ones who are doing all this transformation, and are the ones who are really touching that vegetable or that fish or that piece of meat. So I need them on board. I need their sign off on this. I need them to be committed. And obviously the only way to do this is to get them on board from the get-go and give them that reason first and foremost, and try to get them to understand how this is not just a nice thing to have on top, but it's a way of operating. and why we also have to do this as people in hospitality and food and beverage. And everyone knows the statistics, right, on how much emissions we're responsible for, but people in hospitality don't necessarily understand that. And what does that really mean? What do emissions really mean? So that's why in the very early days, and we're still doing many iterations of it, is to give people a little bit of climate literacy, to have them understand how we fit into the overall food system. Why us as people in hospitality, why should we care? How much leverage we have on the global economy, how 10% of that global economy makes such a big difference, how us employing 1 in 10 people, 60% of whom are women, is a huge advantage, and we must use that. At least for me, the moment that I started realizing where we sit in that overall picture is when I started seeing things with different lens. And the moment you start to have that point of view, you can't look backwards, you can't see things any other way. And that's really one of my biggest motives as well, to do everything that I'm doing right now. From a guest perspective, I think that is really the other challenge. People come out to dine not because of sustainability. It's not the top 5, not even the top 10 list of things why people go to dine out. And we understand that and accept that completely, because everything that we are doing in the restaurant is completely our own responsibility. And we said, we want to do this. Now, if I can deliver the experience, the quality of food, of beverage, of service to my guests at the way that they expect, and at the same time run this responsible operation, that is really what I've set myself up against.
I'm lucky enough to have been to BOCA a number of times over the years. And when you were talking about your staff, I mean, some of the staff are the most knowledgeable, passionate, engaged people. And you ask them questions about the ingredients and they can answer everything, or they will go and get that response. Your menus and the way that you communicate is all connected. How hard is that to do, like as a restaurant? Because there's lots of restaurants out there. You could ask somebody what's in this dish and they have no idea. How have you gone about building that kind of into your community here?
I think that's a challenge for every restaurant out there, to translate the vision of the chef or the owner or just the ethos of the restaurant to the guests through the people who are delivering it, right? The team that is in front of the house or even back of the house, because it's not just communication with our guests, but communication with our suppliers as well. And I think it really starts from the recruitment phase, from the people that we want to bring into our operation. You can teach most people any skill, but the attitude and that hunger for learning, I think it's something that we look for and we put a lot of weight on when we do the recruitment. You don't expect everyone to come in with a large amount of understanding of how we fit into the overall climate change discussion, what sustainability really means. But at least if you've got a bit of curiosity, then that's a great starting point. From that point onwards, I think it takes getting people on board with this idea and this point of view, and then continuous learning, but also starting from the very basics on what sustainability really means, especially those who have joined us recently. So it's a continuous effort. They have to find their own voice as well, because we never wanted to be a script. We wanted it to be genuine and really told through their own words. And most of the time they will connect. Most of the time they will understand why we're trying to reduce waste, why we're trying to come up with these creative ways to put back ingredients into the menu, into the dishes. So, the moment that you get that click, I think that's the moment when they feel that they can do it on their own. And they have a sense of pride as well, to know that they're doing something that has a higher purpose. A lot of us in the industry are very passionate about what we do. We're passionate about hospitality and dining and serving. But to give people another reason and another purpose, I think, at least for me, that's what gets me up in the morning.
Do you have a favorite story or memory from this process and this journey that you've been in?
I think it's seeing the impact that it has when we started doing this, when we started with a bit of local sourcing, with a bit of trying to incorporate certain species that do not usually exist on commercial menus in commercial kitchens, I think seeing that feedback from guests who have told us that, oh, we've never tasted this type of fish, although we've lived here for a long time, or seeing the reaction on a lot of people who are from the UAE or born, brought up, or spent some time when we introduce some of the desert plants that we're working with. It gives them a bit of nostalgia because they know that this is something that only comes out after the rain, and it will remind them of days maybe with their parents when they go out to the desert. That's always very rewarding, of course. But I think what has been really a fabulous experience is getting deep in the research. And because this is so multidisciplinary and it requires getting a lot of people involved, from scientists and conservationists and people who are in the sustainability realm, getting to know a lot of the ideas, a lot of the concepts that are being discussed. I think that's been one of the most exciting things, at least for me.
So earlier this year, you've been getting involved with Emirates Nature, WWF, ICBA, and they came together. They brought some of the finest chefs together to really celebrate local and native desert plants, or what's the technical term? Halophytes?
Halophytes. We're looking at a specific variety of sea vegetables, if you like. Halophytes. Halophytes are salt-loving crops, salt-loving plants. Things like salicornia and arthrocolon. There is a native variant that exists here in the UAE, and they grow along the coastlines next to mangroves. I've followed the incredible work of the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture, or ICBA, who have been working in the UAE since 1999. And this is a group of scientists that is looking at salt-tolerant and climate-resilient crops to grow in poor soil conditions like the ones in the UAE, and can thrive on salt water and high salinity water. So one of the species that they're looking at are halophytes. And I've always been fascinated with that plant, with the work that ICBA is doing, and Dr. Sisi and obviously the team over there, until this year, where there was a formal coalition, the restaurant, myself, ICBA, and Emirates Nature, all under the Nature-Based Solutions project. So there was one specific project that looked at the coastline of the UAE, particularly the mangroves and these locations in Abu Dhabi and Al Quwain, along the Al Quwain Lagoon, which is a protected area. There are mangroves, there's a native salicornia and a native arthrocolon, two halophyte species. These halophytes, these tips are edible. And recent nutritional analysis has actually shown that they're high in antioxidants. They have all 9 essential amino acids. They're high in vitamin K, vitamin D, and certain types of vitamin B. So almost a superfood. And the idea here is to say, so the mangroves and that area, and obviously the halophytes, are exceptional carbon sequestration elements. So they have that part. The entire area is now becoming a tourist destination. So there is a lot of room for economic benefit there from an ecotourism perspective. There is obviously an opportunity and a chance for businesses to be set up around that place. And then for culinary, for food, and obviously for feed as well, because parts of these halophytes can be used for animal feed as well. But the ones that are interesting for us are the types that could be used in culinary. Now, most chefs know salicornia. It's common in many places in the world, but it's not a very exciting ingredient. A lot of people know that it goes well with fish and seafood, or it could be used as garnish. But because of our very unique location here, with only 5% of the land being arable, I think we need to really look at other solutions or other ideas, or perhaps new crops or new types of species that could become the next local ingredient. So my role is to advocate for halophytes within the culinary world. And my belief is that chefs are the best people to help us transform a very humble ingredient like salicornia and arthrocolon and halophytes into something that we never thought possible. And I always say this, that, chefs are part artisans and part artists, in not just the way that they create beautifully decorated and tasty food, but in helping us understand combinations that we never thought possible. So especially chefs who are at the leading edge of their game, my idea is to introduce it to all the top chefs in the country, in the region, and help us imagine how this ingredient could be used. They have access to a lot of tools, and they're the only ones that could help us understand and see how they could fit into perhaps a dish that is exceptionally well, but then that would maybe help inspire other chefs or just regular people at home to maybe start incorporating this into our daily consumption.
Is there any dishes that you're super excited about that you've seen? Obviously, it's a journey, and so you're trying to encourage chefs and the culinary community to engage around halophytes. But in terms of what have you seen? What's exciting you? What's something that you kind of gone, wow?
So most chefs will tell you, when you talk about salicornia and halophytes, it's the perfect pairing with fish and seafood. That saltiness, that brininess, but it's mostly used as garnish. The idea here is to say, okay, how can we go further? How can that ingredient stand on its own, maybe through a simple frying, or what would happen if we dehydrate it and then turn it into a green salt? What would happen if we incorporate it into something a little bit more elaborate, ceviches and poke bowls, but also into risotto dishes or a lot of vegetarian dishes? It is a sea vegetable at the end of the day. So I think really getting more people involved to help us really imagine things that we never thought possible is definitely the way. But Chef Patricia from BOCA, she's created an orzo dish with salicornia and seaweed, which I think is a really beautiful execution and transformation of that ingredient.
Talking about the menu at BOCA, in looking at the menu and thinking about the menu, what are some dishes, if people are in Dubai and they're going to come to BOCA, what are some of the things that they must have?
So that's been obviously one of the things that we spend a lot of time on, trying to create a copy of a menu and using the right words where we don't alienate people. You don't see as reading a menu as a tedious exercise. We need to resonate with everyone quite, immediately. They don't need to spend a lot of time trying to understand what ingredients these are or trying to imagine what the dish is like. So we need to be quite descriptive, but at the same time, we need to be reserved in the amount of text that we include or how technical we have to be. So with this menu edition, we wanted to go actually a little bit further. So kind of the exact opposite of what I was just saying, trying to give people a lot more information about provenance, but a lot more information about the transformation and the cooking methods that happen in the kitchen. So we ended up with an Excel sheet of a menu, which is obviously not what we want and not what guests want to see. So we reached a compromise, and right now our menu is split into 3 sections. So your vegan and vegetarian dishes, the fish and seafood, and obviously the better meat that we like to call it. And every dish is named after the main ingredient in that dish. And obviously we try to know where these ingredients are from. So every dish has a bit of information about where it's from down to the city or the region. And then it's mentioned there what type of cooking is involved, whether it's fried or grilled or it's in a salad. And then if you want to understand a lot more, we've attached in the back of the menu an illustrated map, a map of the UAE. So some of the ingredients that we're proud of from the country, where they come from, and a little bit of information about the farmer or the farm or the producer of that particular ingredient. it's quite a balancing act that we have to continuously do, because provenance is one of the elements that we think about. There is a lot of work that happens around waste. What happens to the ingredients the moment that we start transforming them or peeling them or changing them. So what happens to all of that, and what happens at the end of the day, after our entire operation. So who are the people that we're working with, from composting our organic waste with the waste lab here in the UAE, to working with people like Neutral Fuels, who are transforming our used cooking oil into biodiesel, to the oyster reef project. We only serve one type of oyster in the restaurant, which is the beautiful oyster coming in from Diba Bay. So we collect the shells, we clean them, we dry them, and then every 2 weeks, we send them to their local facility here, which gets taken to the East Coast because they're building a 1 kilometer reef under the water. There's a lot of work that is being done, but it's very hard to put it all together into that menu. Otherwise, you end up really with that large document. But there are small little mentions, and if you're interested, then you will scan a QR code, will take you to a document, and you understand a lot more.
Well, you're all going to have to try and make it to Dubai and come down to BOCA. It's an absolute treat. And Omar, the work you're doing is amazing. Every time I speak to you, I learn something new. I really appreciate the thought you're putting into not only what you're doing, but also how you're communicating it. And so thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.